This week and for the next couple AMAs, we're going to focus a little bit more about interviewing esports professionals. For those of you that don't know, we do have a Beyond the Game Challenge series. Essentially, these are opportunities for us to think about students beyond just those that are interested in competing, but also the students that want to be, future videographers, future graphic designers, analysts, managers, and all those things. So we really want to empower students to kind of think about those other roles. And so we are hosting the Beyond the Game Challenge series. We're gonna amp up the ones for spring. Add some pricing, some submission details, kind of like how we did for the Ducks NHL 19 Beyond the Game challenges. That went really well. So we're going to be changing up how we do AMAs a little bit to expose you all to some other folks out there in the industry. So for those of you that are writers, we do have a specific Beyond the Game challenge that is interview an esports professional. And so you are allowed to use any content to be able to write those interviews, because we know that as students, it's not really easy for you all to just find an esports professional and get time to interview them. That's a lot to ask for you all. So so we're going to do some interviews ourselves, but you can use this as content for you all to complete that challenge and write your own interview piece. So we have some interview questions. For those of you joining us live, you're welcome to throw your interview questions also in the chat. But we're just going to get started. So first we're going to do some intros. For those that don't know me, I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Samantha Anton. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for NASEF, and I help support all the clubs and programs and events that we do. It's my honor to introduce Marc Urbino, but I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sure. My name's Marc. I am currently a videographer and editor for the team 100 Thieves. Basically what that entails is I work with our teams and our content creators to post videos on our YouTube channel, whether that's or mini doc series or some of our more fun pieces. So it's pretty much what I do in a nutshell.
Perfect. So as you know, we're primarily a high school student organization. So I kind of want to take it back to high school for you.
Sure.
So you probably didn't know that you were always going to be a videographer, editor, your entire life. But if we can take it back to your high school experience, what were you involved with, and where did you think you were going to end up?
Sure. Well, that's a pretty interesting question. Back in high school, I didn't do anything like too special. Obviously I grew up playing a lot of games. Terrible at most of them. But in terms of my interests, I was at the time looking to be a biomedical engineer. At least that's what I was interested in going forward with in high school. But one of my involvements that I really enjoyed was I was part of a TV broadcasting and journalism class. And that was the first time that I got exposure to the process of filming things and editing things. And this was kind of like for a weekly newscast that would go up every week. I said weekly. But we would, I got introduced to that whole process, and I really kind of was super interested in it. But by the time college rolled around, it didn't really, wasn't really something that I got into until later on in my college years. But things kind of fell.
So we went to college together.
Yes, we did.
What's funny is I have a film degree from the University of California, Irvine. You, pursuing a career in videography editing, do not have a film degree.
I do not.
So in college, what was kind of your experience like?
Sure. In college, I ended up pursuing a degree in business economics. During this time, though, I got involved with something called the Solstice League, which was basically a sketch comedy group on campus. Obviously, you know all about that. Sam was the director of the show that we were a part of, which is how we got introduced. But so I did that since my sophomore year, and it was by far my favorite involvement on campus. It's something that I put a lot of time into. And during that time, at least my first 2 years, we had a videographer who would shoot and edit for us. So that whole process was something that I saw from the sidelines, and I got to edit a few things here and there, but I never really dove fully into that whole process. But it was right before my senior year where I, with your help and some other friends, I expressed interest in trying to pursue just filming and editing as a career in general without really understanding the scope or the field that I was trying to go into. But I knew that it was something that I wanted to do at least for the show. And I went really hard that year. I bought my first camera in November of 2015, I believe. And from there, I basically taught myself how to film, taught myself how to edit through YouTube tutorials and just doing things hands-on. And that's how I kind of really got into the whole process of filming and editing, and that's something I fell in love with.
And I did witness that, the YouTube tutorial, looking up how to fix things.
Oh, I know.
I want to take a quick segue, or not segue, but for those of us joining us live, I did see someone throw a 100 Thieves symbol, so
Woo!
shout out to you. But we are in the USAID Esports Arena right now, and the fighting games community has a bit of a tournament going on. So it is a little loud in here. My apologies if you can't hear us that well. So just let us know in the chat, and then we can turn up the microphones a little bit. But yeah, so I just want to take a quick side note on that. But yeah, so I remember that you were, looking up tutorials and figuring out, when things would go wrong, you kind of have to troubleshoot yourself. Is that something that you did with all things in your life? Where when you don't know how to do something, you're the type that's kind of resourceful and you look things up?
Oh, 100%. I mean, even starting from high school, right? Like, we live in that age where it's kind of not completely on yourself to figure things out, but you do, or at least most people have the resources to be able to at least look things up online and whatnot. So definitely was a big part of me figuring things out in high school and college, because there were a lot of things I didn't know that had to, basically be looked up and figured out that way. But especially in regards to this, and it's very, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's very, it's easy to find the resources. I wouldn't say easy to learn, but it's very easy to find people who have tutorials, who have gone through similar experiences, and basically get you set up like that. So.
You have a lot of fans in the chat right now.
Oh, I see Exotic and Ricky. Sup, friends?
Okay, so, and then in other things in your life too, I feel like in family dynamics as well, there's always those some siblings that are always ones that are looking up how to figure out everything. I remember when I was a kid and I figured out how to fix the printer once. I then became the printer goddess, and now to this day, anytime my family has issues with the printer, I am the one to fix it. And it's not that I have this overwhelming knowledge of fixing printers in my head. It's just that I knew how to look it up.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting too, because I learned about film and everything through school, and I also did it in high school as well. But it's very interesting that you have positioned yourself with a very solid career as a videographer and editor, and you're so self-taught.
Yeah.
So and that's great to hear, because we have students, not every student that we have is going to want to pursue higher education, and it doesn't mean that you can't accomplish it.
Yeah.
So we have a question from Matt Akavan, who is with Florida Mayhem. Hi, Matt. So how do you put your creative flavor in your content? Do you have your own kind of signature?
Let's see. That's an interesting question. I would say, in terms of my creative flavor, I don't know exactly if I have a specific style or a signature thing. I would say that I do draw inspiration from a lot of the other kind of forms of entertainment that I consume, whether that's music videos or a lot of anime. Most of my friends definitely know that. Sam knows that. I think especially music is something that's super important when it comes to any kind of video that's put online. If you look at 100 Thieves content across our YouTube channel, you'll notice that music is very heavily used and emphasized in all of our pieces. So I definitely use music and in that regard to kind of drive the emotion of the piece and whatnot. And it's kind of just I wouldn't say I wing it most of the time, but a lot of it is kind of just last minute creative sparks, I suppose. And that's a team effort from everybody as well.
We have to be in kind of a specific mindset to have those creative moments.
Totally. I think part of it too is kind of being in tune with the emotion that you're trying to get out of the video. And I think that comes easy to me because my emotions are pretty much based on the performance of our team sometimes, which is good and bad in the sense where I'm able to kind of convey what I'm feeling at the time, because I remember how it felt when we lost in that moment or when we won in that moment. And even though I have no direct impact on that, that's something that I take into consideration when it comes to putting pieces together. So.
Okay. Is 100 Thieves your favorite team that you've ever worked with?
Oh, 100%. Like,
Is that biased?
no, I mean, just objectively speaking, I freelanced for a bunch of orgs and a lot of like professional teams in the past couple of years. But one thing specifically that I liked about 100 Thieves in the beginning is how much emphasis and how much care there is for the creative side of the company. I mean, our founder and CEO, Nate Schott, is a content creator himself, former Call of Duty pro turned YouTuber. But the first day that I met him, it was really cool to see how much he cares about what, not only like what we do as videographers, but just company-wise. Company-wide, he cares about what people do. But speaking specifically on the video side, it's very cool to see an organization in general care so much about the content that comes out, because it is, in my opinion, obviously super important. But
So you have worked with a couple other organizations before. So what would you say was your first start in esports?
My start in esports came actually with UCI Esports. As I mentioned before, I worked on that show Solstice. Sam was the director, but then we also had a staff supervisor at the time, which was Marc, who is now the director of the UCI Esports program. And it was during my senior year where, after the show, he expressed that he was going to be trying to kickstart the UCI Esports program. And from there is where I got basically introduced to the whole scope of the scene, because I had known that esports was a thing, but I never realized how big it was, especially on our campus. So when Marc told me that he was starting that he wanted my help with creating some video content to kick off, that was kind of
logo.
and oh yeah, I also designed the logo, like my one and only like success in the graphic design world. But yeah, from there I got introduced to Charlene Ham, who worked with Team Dignitas previously. That was my start with my first professional org, and I started doing work with their League of Legends team in spring 2017, and jumped to a bunch of different teams freelancing, like Team Liquid, Florida Mayhem. I think I did something for HTC Esports at one point, Tempo Storm for a while. So there was a lot of jumping around to different orgs, and I guess seeing the scope of things in that way.
But you weren't working full-time this entire time.
No.
So do you want to talk a little bit about your hiring situations?
So it's good to see like esports now is in a very like growing and like a flourishing state where there's more resources being poured in and more resources being made available for basically all positions in the scene. At the time when I first started, orgs were kind of figuring out, because it was so brand new, just like the role of an esports videographer. It seems like it was pretty it was a pretty new place to kind of explore a career in. So in terms of freelancing, it was kind of just being on contract work for, you know, several projects at a time, or being on a full-time contract on like a weekly basis, that kind of thing. Each esports org kind of differed in terms of, you know, what they offered, in terms of compensation and how much you'd be working or what kind of projects they wanted delivered. But it was kind of just a bunch of varying factors. But it was good to see that by the time I rolled through to 100 Thieves, that it was more kind of like a steady, even though I was working contracted for a while, it was still a good source of like income and really, really valuable experience. And that goes across all the other orgs I worked at as well.
And then is there anything else that, so we talked about kind of building those early mentorships. We talked a little bit about being flexible with the different types of work. Is there anything else that you would recommend for other people trying to do what you're doing?
My biggest piece of advice is to really take a look at what's currently being put out there, not only with just esports orgs in general, but just, you know, YouTube content in general, just documentaries, Netflix, all that stuff. Take that, see what you learn from that, and try to apply it in your own way. The biggest thing in esports right now that's going to get you through is how much you care and your passion for whatever project you're working on, no matter like what, you know, the size of it is because esports is a pretty demanding field because of how new it is. People are trying to, you know, push past each other and grow faster than the others. So there's a lot of competition out there, but there's also, in this span of time too, there's a lot of opportunities for you to get involved. So I would say If you're looking to get into esports specifically, try to find a local club, whether that's, if you're starting out in high school and you have a high school club there, maybe try to get involved that way, or start a high school club or high school organization and get involved that way. Or if you go to a university, or just whatever opportunities you can get involved with and start building your portfolio, just start doing that right away. And there are plenty of opportunities for you to learn and produce your own projects, like outside of the scope of work, just to get that portfolio built. Because my portfolio before UCI Esports and all of this was only sketch comedy stuff, which doesn't, it was hard for a bit trying to get that to translate over to a lot of the esports work, but it still was something, and it still was a starting point.
Funny that you mentioned using your high school as an example for videos. We did just offer a $1,000 scholarship to Singing Coyote Mesa from Magnolia High School for his video that he produced for the Beyond the Game challenges. And we do have a couple more Beyond the Game challenges that are video specific that you can participate in. But the next question, and this is from Exotic, so what is your method for brainstorming ideas?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, it kind of depends on what kind of project is being worked on. Obviously, the ideation process for, let's say, our documentary series is going to be very different from coming up with, let's say, a challenge for our Fortnite players. I think the biggest thing with it all is that it's at least for 100 Thieves, it's a very, it's like a group effort where everybody's kind of putting in their own ideas, putting it up on a board and seeing what works. For me in particular, I'm pretty formulaic when it comes to at least brainstorming what I'm going to be putting down on my timeline when I'm editing. I like to have all the pieces gathered together, and I like to pull selects from the best selects from all of our footage and have it laid out so I know what's there, I know what's available, and then I kind of fit that into a storyline that we came up with as a group early on. I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of the general idea, at least for my end.
I'm going to skip a question briefly, but hop down to one that's kind of in line. But how is it working collaboratively on a video, and not just being the only person?
Totally. So I would say before coming to 100T, well, on Dignitas it was actually pretty collaborative as well. But for the most part, it was kind of just on me to come up with an idea, execute on that, and whatever happens, happens. Which is good if you are, confident in what you're doing, and there's no fail safe or whatnot. But I like working in a group a lot more, just because I think it's always better to have multiple minds on a project, just so that in case you miss something, someone else will catch it and they're able to advise you to fix a mistake or come up with a better idea. I would say, working with people like Exotic and Ricky and everybody, it's actually super helpful because we're able to cover each other's, I wouldn't say weaknesses, but our strengths add up into something that's able to to create an even better product than I would have had by myself. For example, Gabe Ruiz, our director of production at 100 Thieves, is a creative genius, and he comes up with certain ways to execute a story that maybe I wouldn't have, because he thinks so outside of the box, and I'm able to execute on that because of his vision and our vision combined. So it's something really cool to be able to collaborate on.
And 100 Thieves kind of has a history for having the best score in videos. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you pick a music or score for a video?
Sure. I mean, I would say I'm definitely biased, but I do think in terms of just esports content across the board, I think we definitely do have the best selection of music. And I think it's because we use music properly. Not to call out anyone specific, but I think a general trend in esports content is to kind of just throw on a hip-hop instrumental, or throw on kind of an EDM track into background and let that run throughout your whole video. And that works for some content, but for us in particular, like I said before, we use music to really bring out emotion in the piece, whether it's funny or happy, sad or dramatic, or someone's angry. That's just what we like to do. The piece that I work on specifically right now is our Call of Duty series called 0 to 100. And there's a lot of ups and downs for sure. If you've been following our Call of Duty scene, it's been an interesting ride. We started out really, really cool. We had a lot of high expectations, but then we fell through some rough patches for a long period of time. And when you're creating content about a team that's losing, it's obviously very hard to create something that's, you know, enjoyable to watch. But I think that's something we excel at, is because the whole point of the content is to make people care about the players or the org in general, and we use music to kind of drive that. So in terms of when I'm selecting music from like because we use a site called MusicBed, and there's the selection there is actually incredible. Since I have a long commute to work, I'll be like listening through like playlists just in general, just so I know what new music is being released in the library. But I will basically build out the storyline so I know what emotion I'm trying to convey, and basically look for songs that, you know, that match the mood. And I say music selection is probably the hardest part of putting together a piece, because that's how much emphasis we put on it.
Right.
But it's really just all about conveying emotion. So.
So what type of genre would you say is your favorite genre to produce?
In terms of
For videos,
for
just
videos,
in general.
I mean, as of now, I've really been enjoying working on our documentary pieces. I think it is so important for teams to invest in this kind of content specifically, because this generates basically like a fan base that isn't sticking around based on your team's performance. You know, like, it's you know, tough to say, because right now our performance for our League of Legends team, you know, we ended up going 4-14 in the spring split. Unfortunately, last place, which was a big shift from last season. But I think Gabe Ruiz, who was the project lead on the Heist, which is our League of Legends doc series, did a really incredible job of, I think, keeping people informed on what's going on behind the scenes, and having people still care about this team who worked so hard, but unfortunately things didn't work out too well. So I think like documentary series, I think, are just so crucial to retaining that fan base, and also just like sharing the experiences of these players who, you know, get a lot of flack online for their performances, but you don't know what goes on behind the scenes. You don't understand like what each individual is going through. I mean, I don't even understand what like our Call of Duty guys are thinking 24/7, but I just do my best to kind of relay that over, so people, you know, so people care. And I think more so people just understand where each individual player is coming from, and I think that's super important.
And I think another thing that we can talk about that we haven't already talked about is kind of the network of people, not just, you know, who knows who, but also who helps you produce content.
Yeah.
So you also practice, you know, filmmaking on the side, and you have side people that you kind of work with. What would you say brought you all together, you know, other than the obvious, you know, working on the same projects? But for some high school students, I think I'm kind of leading into the response I want you to say.
Okay.
But, you know, if someone in high school is really interested in pursuing videos or doing something around that, you know, you're never going to, or I'm not going to say never, but you won't typically see someone being able to do a lot on their own.
Yeah.
You know, they have to have some other people helping with the production and all those things. So for you, what kind of helped you build your network? You know, how do you all work together, and what kind of goes behind that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, just speaking, let's say like 100 Thieves in particular, in terms of like the whole production process. Like I, for example, I'm like the lead editor on the project. So, but it doesn't mean I'm doing everything by myself. I have Andrew Vong. He is basically, I consider him the lead videographer on the project, because while I'm editing like footage from the previous day, Andrew is going out and actually like filming and being really hands-on with, you know, in terms of like being there during our matches and things like that. We have Gabe Ruiz, who's working with me on like pre-production and basically building out the storyline, setting up for interview questions, things like that. Ricky, who's our production manager, is making sure that like everything is being scheduled and done on time, and helping with that process, and just making sure everybody has what they need to get their jobs done. We have Exotic, who was helping me clip the streams, because for a very long time I was still in the process of learning Call of Duty and what plays work in terms of our montage sequences, so Exotic was a huge help on that. So it really is just like everybody coming together, and even though I'm the one editing the project, it's like there's so many pieces like working together that having multiple hands to help with that is so important. And I think just in general, like if you're just starting out, I think it's important to find maybe, like-minded people who have the same or at least similar goals as you to, work on a project and do things like that. And the esports like creative community, like the people that, whether it's like graphic design, photography, videography, motion graphics, all that stuff, everybody is very supportive of each other. And we're all just like, you'll see us on Twitter, just like anytime somebody like releases a project, even if you're on like another team or a rival team, we're all just like gassing each other up, like, oh dude, you killed this project, great job. It's really cool. So if you are interested in learning from people or working with people, there's a whole community out there that you can have access to. And if anybody has any like questions on where to get started, I'm always open to answer those as well.
You can plug your Twitter.
My
It's right
Twitter.
there. So we have a couple more questions. So the next one's from Hit You 3 Times. So do you ever run into conflict with some of the players? I imagine they might get irritated with the videographers following them around so much, especially on losing streaks.
That's a really good question. There's definitely, there have been times where us as videographers gauge, when we should or should not be like filming these guys. I mean, the great thing again about 100 Thieves is that it's established with the players that this is something that we do. This is our jobs. Like we're doing our jobs, they're doing theirs. It's established from the beginning that we're going to be filming a lot of the process, whether they're winning or losing. But it's also, I'm not the type of person that is going to be like, oh, I need to get this shot for me. Like this is going to make my project look amazing. At the end of the day, like I do my best to mind everybody's personal space with the intention, of course, like doing my job and doing my part for the team. Like everything I do is for the team. Everything they do is, just like that. So there have been occasions in the past where maybe, we take a step back, but for the most part, it's pretty clear that we're just doing what we do. Luckily, we run with Sony A7S2s, which are a small body camera, so we're not super like invasive. And if we're ever filming during sad moments, we'll put on like the really long lens, step really far away, and just film from far away. And that's kind of the, the go-to if you're not trying to be like in a player's face, especially after like a pretty, like devastating loss or something like that.
So as a professional videographer and editor, you likely have a lot of access to equipment just through work alone. But when you were first getting started, you talked about buying your first camera. For high school students, any career that involves technology and that kind of like craft work, it's pretty expensive. You know, if I want to go and buy a really good camera right now, I'm going to be spending a couple $100 to a couple $1,000. For high school students, if they're still figuring out why they're getting started and all that, what are some options for them to not have to invest in a ton of money but still get better at becoming a videographer?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the first thing I would do probably is, I know at my high school, because we had a video production class and club, there were some of those resources available just through the school alone. So I think the first thing I would do is check to see if those resources are available. And if not, I mean, the great thing about this field in general, or just making videos and making content, is that you can film off of your phone and it can still be something amazing. Like you'll see some of the most successful YouTubers or like, comedic sketch like YouTubers and stuff you see on Twitter and Facebook and things like that. They're filming these sketches and these videos off of their phones, and it may not be like the cleanest looking, but the content in it is just so compelling or so funny or just things like that. So even if you don't have access to like the best cameras and best lenses out there, like you can always try to like learn these techniques by watching things online, trying to maybe implement them through like filming on your phone or whatever's available to you. And then if you need stuff to edit on, like you don't have to be editing on Premiere Pro, even though it's the preferred kind of tool, preferred software in the industry right now. Like there are plenty of free options that you can at least learn the basics on, and maybe down the road as you can maybe like save up money or resources, then you can kind of get into the more advanced areas. But as things stand right now, then you can do anything you want off your phone, I'd say.
Okay. So TikToks are equivalent to YouTube videos at
Oh,
this point.
absolutely. I mean, look, there'll be a 6-second TikTok video that's going to get more views on one video than maybe all of my documentary series combined. It's just, the way of the road. But, as long as you care about what you're putting out, then, you never know.
Right. So we're going to go through a couple more questions and wrap up the interview sometime in the next 5 minutes, maybe. So I want to get to a couple more of the ones on Twitch. So we have another question from Matt, who is also one of our panelists for Beyond the Game Challenges. How do you pick and screen questions for the docuseries?
Oh, that's a really good question. Basically, when we are in pre-production and are planning what questions to ask, it's obviously based in terms of docuseries on the results, what play out in each matches. But something at 100 Thieves that we try to do in particular is not just give a recap of what happened. We like to ask questions and do things beyond just their performance and try to tell stories about their players or maybe their backgrounds or do more abstract things like that. But when it comes to specifically picking and choosing the questions that are shown in the series, I'd say, we definitely ask more than is needed, and we kind of, based on each player's answers and things like that, it's very loud
It's
here.
so loud in here.
Based off of the story that we're trying to tell, we obviously want to be as 100% truthful or as truthful as we can be. So I'd say it kind of just depends on the narrative, whether it's we're giving more insight into, let's say, Kenny's background or how he got into Call of Duty or things like that. I think it's more based on just what we just want to convey to our viewers. So.
Well,
that was very loud.
I know, it was so loud. Let's see. Why is there no Rainbow Six Siege? Are we talking about for NASEF? Rainbow Six Siege is not the most appropriate game to... there are other games that we can put before Rainbow Six Siege that are not as inappropriate. We'll leave that one at that.
I just gotta say really quick, I'm seeing a bunch of yeets in the chat,
and I was trying not to acknowledge that.
I have to bring it up. I really appreciate it. Shout out to the homies.
Now there's gonna be 5 more that come on in. Do you use Lightroom for your photos?
I personally don't do a lot of photo editing, but I know that our Logan Dodson. Everybody knows Logan Dodson. He definitely uses Lightroom, and I'd say most photographers, at least for our team and in the scene, definitely use Lightroom. There's a lot of really good tools on that to get your photos looking nice and crisp.
Perfect. All right, any more questions in the chat? Let's see if a couple more come in. I guess I'll do a quick lightning round to wrap it up. Sure. Favorite movie?
That's a tough one. I can list my top 3.
Okay,
probably.
You can list your top 3.
Interstellar is, I think, absolutely phenomenal. I really like Spirited Away. That's also just one of those ones that you don't really understand watching as a kid, and then you grow up and then you think you understand, but then you don't really know anything. But it's just a beautifully animated film. It's one of, I think, Studio Ghibli's best films. And then 3,
you picked 3.
I know, I picked 3. Those are my top 2.
Okay, favorite music video?
Favorite music video right now, I'd say Last Kiss by Overdose.
Is that appropriate for high school students to watch?
No,
okay,
but it's very good. Let's see. That's just me being honest. Don't watch it.
Okay. Favorite esports docuseries?
I think, there's a lot of good ones out there. There's, TSM Legends is great. Squad is great from Liquid. But I'm probably going to have to pick between The Heist or maybe 0 to 100. Just speaking objectively.
Completely objectively. Got
objectively, 100%.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, production in our ears. All right, so we're actually going to wrap up this stream. Yeah, chat's getting a little wild. We are definitely going to wrap up the stream right now.
Is your favorite artist Mason Ramsey?
Thank you, everyone, so much for tuning in. Oh my gosh, I'm going to stop looking at the chat. Production, can we take away my chat box? Oh, he actually did. Okay. Thank you all so much for watching. So this video is going to go in the archive, or not in the archives. We're going to have it on demand. So if anyone missed it, or if you want to come back and rewatch it again, I didn't close the one on my laptop. Okay, we still have the chat.
I want to read it. Run it up.
So yeah, so the video will be available for those of you that want to come back and watch it again. Just as a reminder, we are relaunching the Spring Beyond the Game challenges. We'll have a submission form and some prizing associated with it to help that are related to the different topics. So thank you so much for Marc for joining us. He's available on Twitter for all of your questions and everything at Thunderfist.
It's just Thunderfist. I'm just annoying.
You have to pronounce it properly. But yeah, so if you have any questions, you know where to find us at NASEF EDU on Twitter, info@esportsfed.org via email. But I just want to say thank you everyone in the chat for participating and hanging out with us. And we'll see you for the next AMA. So take care, everyone.
Woo!